All right, so today we're really diving deep into one of the most, well, let's just say it, talked about presidencies in recent history. I mean, you can't turn on the news without hearing something about Biden,
No kidding. It seems like every move is under a microscope.
which honestly is kind of how it should be, but it also means there's just this, like, avalanche of information out there. Hard to keep up, you know?
Yeah, totally get that. Feels impossible to really grasp the big picture sometimes.
Exactly. So that's kind of our mission here, right? We're going through, oh, we've got a whole stack of research and articles here.
Trying to pull out the essential stuff.
Exactly. What you need to know, whether you're prepping for, a debate or just want to be informed.
Informed, engaged, all that good stuff.
Right. So buckle up, everyone, because we're covering a lot. Pandemic response, the whole building back better thing, Afghanistan,
Oh, and Ukraine. Can't forget that.
right? Ukraine, obviously a huge deal. And of course, the Supreme Court. Phew, it's going to be a ride.
Definitely a lot to unpack. And I think what's so interesting is how Biden walked right into, well, not one, but TWO, huge challenges right off the bat.
Oh, for sure. I mean, talk about trial by fire. You've got this deeply divided nation. And on top of that, a global pandemic still raging.
Exactly. You can't downplay the pandemic's impact either on the U.S. or globally. And, the sources we've been looking at, they really focus on those early days, how the administration reacted, what policies they put in place. It kind of set the stage for everything that followed, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, big time. So where do we even start, I guess, with the American Rescue Plan? I mean, everyone remembers those stimulus checks.
Right, but it went way beyond just those checks. It was this, massive attempt to prop up the economy, prevent a total collapse.
Yeah, I mean, we were all kind of glued to the news back then, wondering just how bad it was going to get.
And there was, and still is, this whole debate, right? Was it too much money? Did it maybe contribute to the inflation we're seeing now? There's a lot to dig into there.
Definitely some food for thought. But beyond the economy, there were also those immediate shifts on the global stage. Things like rejoining the Paris Agreement, reversing that travel ban.
Oh, absolutely. Those were huge GE signals. The U.S. was kind of signaling to the world, hey, we're back and we're doing things differently now.
So not just symbolic gestures then.
No, not at all. Rejoining Paris put the U.S. right back in the thick of climate negotiations. It changed how other countries saw them, their commitment to, global cooperation, really significant for international climate policy.
Okay, so on the domestic front, building back better was this big, I guess, flagship policy, but it kind of got complicated, right?
It did. There was the bipartisan infrastructure law, which everyone talks about. Roads, bridges, broadband internet, clean energy, billions and billions of dollars. One of the biggest infrastructure investments ever, actually.
Which in today's political climate is pretty amazing that they got bipartisan support for something that big.
Right. It shows that maybe, just maybe, there's still room for compromise in Washington, at least on certain issues.
Okay, well, compromise is great, but then we've got the elephant in the room, the Afghanistan withdrawal. Hard to talk about Biden's presidency without that coming up.
Totally. And it's a complicated issue, right? On one hand, he did fulfill a major campaign promise, ending America's longest war, but then the way it happened.
Yeah, it wasn't pretty.
Not at all. The sources we've read, they don't shy away from criticizing how chaotic it was. Taliban took over super fast. The evacuations from Kabul were just heart-wrenching.
Those images from the airport, they're seared in my memory. It really brought home the human cost of conflict and just how difficult it is to exit a war zone.
For sure. And it raised a lot of questions about strategy, intelligence gathering, the whole handling of the situation.
Tough lessons learned, for sure.
Wow.
Which brings us to another global event that shaped this presidency, the war in Ukraine. How has this conflict kind of forced Biden's hand, foreign policy-wise?
It's really thrust him into this global leadership role. He's leading the charge, rallying allies to condemn Russia, providing a ton of aid to Ukraine, and those sanctions, they've hit Russia hard.
Right, and he's having to walk this tightrope, supporting Ukraine without, starting World War III.
Exactly. It's a delicate balance. And I think when you look at both Afghanistan and Ukraine side by side, it kind of highlights how much America's role on the world stage has changed and how Biden's had to adapt.
So much pressure. Okay, let's shift gears back to the home front. It's been a bit of an economic roller coaster these past few years, hasn't it?
It has. Inflation, supply chain issues, the war in Ukraine throwing everything off balance. It's been a lot to navigate.
And how has the administration responded to all that?
Well, there's the Inflation Reduction Act, which, as you might guess, aims to tackle inflation. Lower healthcare costs, invest in clean energy, reform the tax code. They're also really focused on job creation.
Sounds like they're trying to hit the problem from all angles.
They are, but some people argue it's not enough, or even that it'll make things worse. Economics can be tricky like that.
Right, there's always debate. Now, on to something a bit different, but definitely a major moment. The Supreme Court. Biden's appointment of Ketanji Brown Jackson was pretty historic.
Absolutely. First black woman on the Supreme Court. Talk about a landmark achievement for representation and diversity. It's something that will be in the history books.
For sure. But then, of course, the court itself generated massive headlines with the whole Roe v. Wade decision.
Oh, yeah. That overturned decades of precedent, and the impact's still rippling out. The sources we have, they really get into the weeds on that.
Seems like everyone's got an opinion on it.
Totally. It's sparked these huge debates about abortion rights, states' rights, the whole role of the federal government in personal health care, the whole legal and social landscape around reproductive rights is just different now. And who knows what the long-term consequences will be.
Yeah, that's something we're all going to have to watch unfold. And it's not just abortion, right? There's this underlying anxiety on both sides of the aisle about what the court might do next. Gun control, affirmative action.
Oh, yeah. It's like everyone's holding their breath. And there's this debate brewing about the court's legitimacy, whether it's becoming too politicized. The potential for even more division is definitely there.
Well, on that cheerful note, we've covered a lot of ground here. Pandemic response, economic turmoil, global conflicts, Supreme Court shakeups. It's been a wild ride for Biden.
It has. And honestly, this is just scratching the surface. There's so many layers to this presidency, and we've only touched on a few key themes. So I'd encourage everyone listening to, keep exploring, read those sources, get different perspectives.
Yeah, great advice. And to send you off with something to ponder, think about this. How will historians ultimately judge the Biden presidency? Will it be those responses to crises that define him? Or maybe the groundwork laid on climate change, economic inequality, things like that. Who knows? But one thing's for sure, the story isn't over yet.
Not by a long shot.
All right, well, on that note, thanks for tuning in to this deep dive.
Yeah.
And until next time, stay curious, everyone.
And informed.